when health is absent. Wisdom cannot reveal itself. Art cannot manifest. Strength cannot fight. Wealth becomes useless, and intelligence cannot be applied. FBSN presents The Health Wave. Maximum information for making wise health and lifestyle decisions.
Welcome to The Health Wave. What do you think the prevalence of autism will be in 10 years? Autism, more than a mysterious controversial syndrome, remains to heat up social media and press with its unresolvable, intense debates. We invited the founder and president of Focus for Health, Mr. Barry Segal, to shed some light on this unresolvable mystery. Hello, Mr. Segal. How are you today?
I'm fine, Victoria. How are you?
Doing great, thank you. I really appreciate you joining us for this segment.
I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Well, I wanted to ask you first, what is Focus for Health and how was it born? What was the idea behind it?
We started when I met an autistic child on a plane. His mother started talking to me, and I became interested in autism. From there, about that time, this was 2010, Andy Wakefield was on television. He wrote a book. A girl that worked for me in the office had an aunt with an autistic child. And I read quite a bit about it, and it all seemed the same. The aunt's child had earaches, gut problems, and regressed off the vaccinations. Rodney Peete wrote a book, Not My Son, and it was the same story. So I just felt that you have to be more careful with certain children and treat them differently. You can vaccinate them, but you got to make sure that they're healthy before that.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Well, when it comes to understanding the nature of autism, there is a lack of transparency. By the official medical terms, autism is solely a genetic condition. And many parents believe it. However, at the same time, they wonder, why does my child have it if no one in my ancestry had it? So, and from what I read, scientists, researchers at the Focus for Health believe that the environment, not the genes, are the culprit. What do you say about this?
It's a combination. The medical field doesn't want you to feel that the environment has any role in it, but you have different countries with very different rates on autism. You have different states with different rates, and it's definitely the environment can play, especially with children that have a special brain or could be susceptible to injury.
Mm-hmm. But you believe that the genetic part also has the place there?
I do, but I don't think it has that big of a place there. I think the environment, some of the things that we do don't make sense. To give a child a Hep B shot at birth when it's a day old, other countries just give it to the babies that the mothers test positive. That's 1 or 2% of the mothers. We give it to every child.
Mm-hmm. Well, what do you think can be done for this idea that the environment has a role in it to become more mainstream, more accepted?
Well, in order to get the people to understand, it's a major battle because you're fighting the pharmaceuticals. They spend a lot of money on it. And we try to do that through a website. And through one thing or another, there has been some movies. There's more awareness with the younger children, and they're being more careful. Another thing that you really have to be careful with, if children miss their vaccines, they give them catch-up vaccines. And that becomes too much, and a lot of children regress off that.
Well, certainly this is one of the hottest questions today in the media and press, whether vaccinations could cause autism, especially the MMR vaccine. And you can hear on YouTube and in the press, in the media, everywhere, so many medical authorities claim that this is not the case, that vaccines have nothing to do with autism. And many experts also agree that on the statistical level of population, this isn't the case. But yet controversy is still there. What's your take on this idea?
Okay, evidently the World Health Organization came out that one of the 10 leading causes of illness is anti-vaxxers. My feeling is that vaccines are a major contributor, and in many cases, if you're careful, you can avoid causing autism. And we have tenants downstairs that take 20,000 square feet with 100 autistic children and adults. And a lot of this didn't have to be if you're careful. And it's a major problem if you're causing a child to be autistic unnecessarily.
So when you're saying that we need to be careful, what do you mean exactly? How do we need to be careful?
We have a document, the red flags of autism, which I can send to you. There's many signs that you can tell that our children could be vulnerable. I had an incident with a friend of mine. I met her daughter she was 1 year old a month after I knew anything about autism. And I said to her, you got to be careful with this child. And when she was 3, all she said was, what say? And I got her to go to a doctor. They stopped vaccinating her. They changed her diet. They treated her rashes internally instead of externally. And she's beautiful today. And if it wasn't for the changes, that child would have been autistic.
I see. So we have to watch for the symptoms.
That's right. I'm sorry, but the main thing you have to realize that there is a connection to vaccines and autism. It's not absolute. If you say something like that, you're an anti-vaxxer and they shut you up. But it's not absolute that you're either pro or anti-vaccine. There's nothing wrong looking for safety.
A few months ago, Focus for Health published a scientist rebuttal to the Danish cohort study, showing some discrepancies in the conclusions on whether MMR vaccines cause autism. So it seems like it's easy to confuse the public, and there's so much research comes out in the media. How do we know which one to trust? What research is trustworthy?
What people have to do as they become more aware, and the percentage of young mothers that are aware went from the high teens to the high 20s. They have to read, they have to understand. A lot of people just trust the doctor. And there's a document that came out that the third leading cause of death in this country was medical error. And the things that we do in here, the other countries don't do, and the life expectancy and the health outcomes are better. And you have to read about it and you have to care about it.
There is a tough question here, and it has to do with my personal experience also. Let's say if I disagree with the mainstream approach to vaccinations, and I'm a lawful citizen of the US, of the United States, how can I exercise my freedom of choice and not be forced to vaccinate if I don't want to? And at the same time, not to be blamed that my child did not get vaccinations and 100 children got sick because of him.
Okay. you have to understand that in this country, we take like 80% of the antidepressants in the world, with 4% of the population. Opioids, thousands of people die annually from it. There's a big deal about the measles outbreak. In the last 15 years, 3 people have died from measles in this country, and 2 of them had other conditions. So you're up against the media distorting, promoting. The systems are wrong. The CDC and the FDA have ulterior motives sometimes, and they don't do the best that could be done. And you need people to speak out. You have another problem. In this country, in order to get educated, they want you to vaccinate. In 1986, there was an act that came out that the pharmaceuticals are not liable for bad products. And then if people force you to vaccinate, they're not liable for the outcomes. Mm-hmm. So you can have bad vaccines causing a problem that very often you're taken for no sense, and nobody's liable, and you just carelessly destroyed someone's life and their parents' life.
Let's say once we become more informed and we understand that what's being pushed on us on all fronts is not safe and effective, for example. So what can we do on the level of our humble general public to protect our vulnerable children?
At this time, it's very tough for the average person to protect themselves. They do have to be educated. They have to be careful. You don't give a sick child vaccines. You wait till he gets healthy, build up his immune system. You certainly don't give him catch-up vaccines, but it costs more money to give him, the individual with it. Then you have to realize that the flu shot is a guess. It's known to be somewhere towards 10-15% effective. It has serious side effects that Guillain-Barré paralysis. We had a 22-year-old baseball player come in, his arm in a sling. He lost the use of his right arm for the flu shot. And people don't realize, especially healthy people, that the flu is a problem, but the deaths are distorted because they put them in with the pneumonia test. We've had people have the flu and they're sick 2 days, but it's not life-threatening if you know how to take care of it. It's a tough situation. It makes no sense with it, and the only way it exists because of the strength of the pharmaceuticals. It's only us in New Zealand that allow the pharmaceuticals to advertise on television, and it's one after another.
I read on your website that there is a new new direction of research that's coming out about autism, and microbiologist Dr. David Lewis suggests it, and he focuses on 10 chemical groups. Can you tell us more about it?
The issue that Dr. Lewis, and he would have to really answer to this himself, I don't want to speak for him, but I think the major premise of what he's talking about is when people research individual chemicals, they look at them individually. They don't really take into consideration how they all interact together. And even with the vaccines, people aren't really looking at the cumulative impact that all of the exposure to the heavy metals can have over time. So what we're dealing with is what he kind of refers to as a toxic soup, and not knowing what's the cause or how it causes our genes to be expressed and the kind of damage that it can cause. So certainly we at Focus for Health can't speak to Dr. David Lewis's research, but I think we're of the same mindset that all of these things working together are creating a very catastrophic impact on not just children, but our population as a whole. It's not just autism. Look at all of the chronic diseases and autoimmune issues that we're facing. When, I'm 50 years old, this was not a reality when I was in school. We didn't have a special peanut allergy table. It's becoming so widely accepted that this is part of our conditions of childhood. And I agree with the belief system that it's the overall impact of all the things we're doing.
We found that amongst the autistic children, that the older children, 20 years area, are much worse, violent, nonverbal, in diapers, and that was in the heavy thimerosal time. And as they took the thimerosal out, and it became less, you still get any autistic, but not as bad as when with the heavy thimerosal, which clearly shows there is a connection between vaccines and autism. And it's not only the thimerosal, it's the aluminum that's going into the body with it. And we have another phenomenon that we see. Very often someone will have an autistic child, and they'll have brothers and sisters that are very bright. And I feel that the family has like special brain development that's susceptible to an invasion with it and can cause major problems.
I do just want to say, to answer your question, most people are afraid to talk about this. They don't want to say at a dinner party with their friends that they have concerns about vaccines because they're really being demonized right now.
Right.
So to answer your question, there are many organizations that are spending all of their time and energy trying to preserve people's rights to exercise freedom of decision when it comes to their children and their medical decision making. I strongly suggest that you write letters to your representatives and let them know where you stand on this issue. People are being silenced, and they're moving these bills. In New York, they passed it in 10 hours. And it's because the public is afraid to come forward and say what they really believe. Even if you don't believe that autism and vaccines have any connection, you still should believe that families have a right to make medical decisions that are in the best interest of their families. We have that right as parents, and no matter what decisions we make, the idea that we're harming the public is proof positive that people do not have confidence in the vaccines that they're putting in their children.
Yep, thank you so much. I agree with you 100% that we should be able to do these things, and we need to know about them and how to get it done correctly in the right way.
I'm gonna give you one more thing. I have a close friend who's on television regularly, and she talked about interviewing me on the vaccine issue. I told her not to. That number one, they won't allow it. And if they do allow it, it'll be a negative for you. So good luck. So good luck.
So good luck to us.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. We'll see the response that we'll get. Please,
Okay.
please keep posting your comments and ask questions. We would love to hear from you. Thank you, Mr. Segal. Thank you, Jennifer, for this valuable information. And we'll see you next week. Stay with us. Stay healthy. Goodbye.
Okay. Thank you.